Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155 from UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not.
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championship, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championship, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnell Joliet, and hopefully your day is going well. We are in December. Yes, we are in the home stretch here. Final month of 2020. Christmas is right around the corner, just 2 weeks away from the time of this recording. I am ecstatic. I am happy, and, as things are beginning to dwindle down, I swear I really do feel like if you go on the internet, whether it be Twitter or YouTube, people are going kind of strange, or people are getting very weird as the year ends. But you know what? Let's go persevere this. In the past week, I've been trying to keep up with what's happening with Bellator, what's happening with One Championship, with UFC, and with Invicta, with boxing. I've had to watch so much combat sports that pretty much is getting kind of overwhelming here. So coming up this Thursday is a Bellator event here. I'm going to be covering that event next week because today I'll be talking about UFC and any ongoing UFC news. But then coming up later this week will be a One Championship review along with a review on the One Championship fights and also any women's fights coming up, including the main events for the Bellator fights as it pertains to women's mixed martial arts. So there's a whole lot of fights coming up this week, a whole lot of things to go break down, and I'll be here with you along the way here. Let's go end 2020 with a bang. So, let's talk about UFC Fight Night. Hermansen versus Vittori. And so this fight here had, I think, about 11 fights. In the past week, it went from 11 fights to just 8 fights. And there are 3 fights that were taken off. One of them was a main card fight, was a women's fight. Sally with Matanda De Rosa and Talia Santos. I was very hyped up for that fight. I thought that fight, more than anything else here, would be almost equal in terms of a back and forth action. Sadly, that fight did not go through, but I was still happy for the entire card here. So let me go start off here with the main event, which is Jack Hermansson versus Marvin Vettori. This is either the third or fourth fighter in a row that Jack Hermansson is fighting that is a replacement. Marvin Vettori is a replacement fighter. He'll be fighting against Jack Hermansson. He only had a week's time to prep up. Both fighters only had a week's time. And I am shocked and surprised that Marvin Vettori made weight because, dude, Hermanton typically is usually bigger than his opponents, but Vettori looks gigantic, man. Insane. The guy's incredibly big, much more bigger than Hermanton here, and that obviously took place. Considering that Marvin Vettori was probably less tired, less gassed, he was less fatigued from training camp because he only had 1 week of training camp for this. Jack Hermansson had, I wouldn't say a long training camp, but he had a substantially a lot more longer one than Vittori's training camp, which led to Hermansson being, I say, more fatigued and being less prepped up for Vettori. Meanwhile, Vettori, he was relaxed, he's cool. All he had to do was to go lose weight. He didn't have to overthink anything. He could go to this fight. He'll make money. The guy will make money. He doesn't have a lot to lose for accepting this fight. So Marvin Vettori has got everything to gain here and nothing to lose. Meanwhile, Jack Hermansson, who is a former top contender, he's got a lot to lose against a replacement fighter here. So starting off this fight here, this fight was very fast. Very, very quick, actually. This fight is at middleweights, but I swear, both these fighters should be natural light heavyweights. I know Jack Hermansson used to compete at light heavyweights, and it was obvious that Marvin Vettori, his natural weight is at light heavyweight, because these two guys are huge, especially Vettori here. But the pace of this fight was incredibly quick here. I put down Vittori gets a knockdown with an uppercut to a left-hand combination. Hermanton stunned onto the ground, and the commentary team was like, oh my gosh, what the heck? Knockout, early finish, wow. But Hermansen, being the tough fighter he is, he recovers as Vettori grapples with him. Vettori squares up and starts doing some ground and pound. And I agree with the commentary team here perfectly in the sense that there really was no actual reason as to why Vettori would stop the ground and pound or try to provoke him to go back to stand-up. Because obviously, Marvin Vettori was winning in the stand-up game. He was able to go clip Hermanton, and if they were to both go and stand up again, then obviously Marvin Vettori would be the one who would be winning. And in this fight here, know what happens in the second and third round, Marvin Vettori was the guy who was winning the stand-up. So, me and the commentary team, we both thought the same thing. Why is Marvin Vettori trying to grapple with Hermansen? Because Marvin Vettori, he's doing some hammer fist, he's doing some ground and pound, and then he puts him on like a headlock. He stops punching him, and then he gets in side control, and then he's like slowly trying to make his way to full mount. He doesn't get there, then gets to half guard, moves to full guard slowly. The pace of the fight slows down, and Paul Felder, Dominic Cruz, John Anik, they're like, I don't get what Vettori's doing. He could have won the fight right then and there, but he chooses to grapple with him, with a guy who is objectively a better wrestler than Vettori. What's going on? So yeah, it definitely was a mistake for Vettori to grapple. He should have either let him get up or push harder in the ground and pound. Because here's something that does bug me actually for all these fights, is that if you got them on the run, as in like if you got the knockdown, they're stunned, you should go push forward and pursue, okay? I don't get this thing. It's like they got all this adrenaline rush for getting a knockdown, and the person's there, and they're stunned. Hermansen, for about 1 second in this fight, he was out of it. Just about 1 second, he was out of it. I swear, he went limp for 1 second. Marvin Vettori should have pressed forward and continually kept hitting hammer fists. Try to square up on him. Try to go and rein in some ground and pound. Now, he was able to get some ground and pound like a full minute after Hermansen was able to recover, though. And by the time Hermansen was able to recover, when he did endure some of the ground pound from Vettori, he was good enough to go and will himself back, and Vettori isn't good enough of a grappler to go keep him down. So, it was very questionable by Vettori here. Now, no, John Anik did say that Vittori's corner crew, when they were doing interviews for the fights, they said that Vettori was going to go and try to explore his wrestling game. They believe that Marvin Vettori's wrestling game is very underrated, and he wants to go showcase his grappling. Okay, I get it, but the win was right there. It was right there. You could have gone and knocked him out. This fight ended by decision. This fight could have ended 2 minutes into the first round. It's completely unnecessary. Like if you got the bag, go take it. Like don't sold the bag here, and he sold the bag here. So first round ends. It goes to Marvin Vettori. Marvin Vettori obviously won the first round. Without a doubt, I'm only disappointed that Marvin Vettori didn't win in the first round because he was right then and there. He was in a perfect position. Him and Roman here tonight were fighters who were in really good positions, but then chose not to go and pursue it. Off the basis they wanted some alternative win condition, or to showcase something else of their fighting skills. And it just bothers me. If the win is there, you take it. Don't try to show off, because if you try to show off, it just looks bad on camera, and especially knowing how this fight plays out, to which it really felt like Marvin Vettori was the one who was doing really well for himself throughout all 5 rounds of this fight here. I thought it was completely unnecessary for Vettori to go showcase his wrestling ability. Showcase your ability when it's required. Don't do it when the win is there and then you choose not to go for the win. That just bothers me. Whatever. So, going into the second round here, Hermansen tries to desperately shoot in for a takedown, but Vettori is picking apart. Second round goes to Vettori. It's more of a sense of Hermansen trying to go and grapple with Vettori here. Vettori, you're learning his lesson. He's like, okay, me selling the bag here, I could have won the first round. I could have won the fight already in the first round, but I did not do it because I was focused on the wrestling, let me just go focus on the striking. And if you're the corner crew of Vittori, they're saying, hey, let this fight remain standing up. Alright then? So Hermansen tries to go for a takedown. Vittori is just slowly picking apart with good left-hand combinations here, man. So Vittori picks him apart for 5 rounds. Vittori, though, although he's fighting very tentatively in the second round, especially compared to the first round, incredibly high pace. Second round, Hermansen is a lot more of the aggressive fighter here, while Vittori is the one who's fighting defensively. But Vittori is still able to go land more volume of shots and more accurate, significant punches. So second round goes to Vittori. Third round, Vittori is a lot less active, and Hermansen starts pushing forward the pace of the fights. So third round goes to Hermansen. Off the basis, and not really because Hermansen fought great in the third round. More of a sense of Hermansen did the same thing as the second round. The difference here is that Marvin Vettori just really didn't do much in the third round as compared to the second round, and was really inactive for the most part. Dominic Cruz said, you know what, I think Vettori here, he's going to hold off, he's going to save his energy for the fourth and fifth round. And I agree with him. First round, Vittori. Second round, Vittori. Third round, Hermansen. But momentum is still in favor of Marvin Vettori going to the fourth. And I was right. Cruz was right. Marvin Vettori repeats the same process of what he did in the second round. Keep the fight standing up. Be defensive at the same time. Trying to prevent Hermansen from wrestling him, because he's always constantly shooting in for the double leg. And so Marvin Vettori, he defends it off. Whenever they're in a clinching situation, Vettori just avoids it as much possible. He tries to get out as quick as he can here. Once again, high volume from both these fighters, but Vettori edges him out just a wee bit more. In the end here, Marvin Vettori wins via unanimous decision, and there's a new record. Record at middleweights for most strikes landed in a middleweight contest. So these two fighters ended up making history. I do feel bad for Jack Hermansson. This is a third or fourth consecutive replacement fighter he is fighting against. And now Marvin Vettori, he defeated a former top contender in Jack Hermansson. So at least the good things coming up in Marvin Vettori's way here. So Marvin Vettori, he is climbing his way up in the middleweight rankings here. And there is a bonus report here. Actually, we got a statement already coming up. So Marvin Vettori issued a statement following a win over Jack Hermansson at UFC Vegas 16. And he goes on to say, it's very simple. Vettori says, "Let's go, baby! All the way to the top." The win over Hermanton pushed Vittori's professional MMA record to 16-4-1, and he's 6-2-1 right now since making his UFC debut. Hermansen and Vittori both entered a promotion around the same time, back in 2016. After beating Hermansen, Vittori is likely to be ranked in the top 5 of the UFC middleweight division, which would earn him a big fight. So, here's something interesting. In the post-fight interview, Vittori calls out Paulo Costa, and I understand that Paulo Costa wants an immediate title match. Paulo Costa ain't getting that. He just ain't right now. Paulo Costa, after there was so much hype on him, and then considering how embarrassing he lost, such a huge, and I remember, so me and my friends were watching the fights, and if you go on YouTube, if you read all the comments, if you look up the GIFs, the GIFs, there's a bunch of videos out there of Israel Adesanya humping Paulo Costa, and the dancing of Israel Adesanya around the corpse of Paulo Costa. So Paulo Costa right now, his stock is dropping. I lost confidence in Paulo Costa, but then I know Paulo Costa, he fought against a world champion. He fought against one of the best fighters out there in the world who's got a high ceiling for potential and could potentially be a double belt champion. That could be a real possibility. So this isn't me Paulo Costa lost to some scrub. No, Paulo Costa lost to a really darn good fighter. But it was the way how Paulo Costa fought against Israel Adesanya. That very tentative style. There was so much hype behind. There was so much promotion from Paulo Costa's part, being I'm going to go and push the pace of this fight here. Because all Israel does is run away. He only counterfights, and he's always backing off. And we're going to put so much pressure on Israel Adesanya. It didn't turn like that. It didn't. And I think right now, it would be the perfect fight to go showcase how good Paulo Costa is coming off that loss against Israel Adesanya against Marvin Vettori. Marvin Vettori fights at a very high level. Both these fighters stylistically match up well with one another. Paulo Costa is a good grappler, but he's not necessarily known for his grappling ability in the UFC. It will be two tanks going right at it though, and I won't be surprised, I really won't, if Marvin Vettori is able to go and score a victory on Paulo Costa. It's been shown, Paulo Costa, he's not invincible. He is very beatable, and now knowing that he's very beatable, and knowing how good of a performance Marvin Vettori gave in this UFC Fight Night event, it's a real possibility we could see Paulo Costa versus Marvin Vettori. Coming back after the short break here, I'll be discussing the rest of the UFC Fight Night event, Hermansen versus Vittori. Coming back after the short break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back, and so I'm discussing UFC Fight Night, Jack Hermansson versus Marvin Vettori. The fight had Marvin Vettori defeating Jack Hermansson and him calling out Paulo Costa. Marvin Vettori now, he should be in the top 5. Paulo Costa right now, he's been put in a setback lately as a result of his loss to Israel Adesanya. And I think right now it'd be stylistically a perfect matchup for both fighters to really show off how good they are competing against one another here. And if Paulo Costa were to get 1 or 2 fights under his belt again, he could fight for the title. And Paulo Costa should accept any fight going his way, because since Israel Adesanya wants to go and climb his way up into light heavyweight, Paulo Costa needs to be the number 1 contender again, fast and soon, before Izzy makes his way up. I don't think there's that much hype going behind or support for Paulo Costa moving up in the rankings for at light heavyweights. And even though Paulo Costa is a top-ranked fighter in the middleweight division, he has to go get a couple wins under his belt at both middleweights and at light heavyweights if he ends up being the contender for Israel Adesanya's light heavyweight title. There's a long path for Paulo Costa to go get his rematch, so he has to go and win as quick as possible, as soon as possible, in order to go and get himself back in the discussion of being a contender. So we go for the co-main event here. Ovaint Saint Preux versus Jamahal Hill. I put down notes here. OSP is doing a lot more side kicks and push kicks, while Jamahal Hill is going into the body with body shots. With specifically, he's just leaning in, going for straight jabs to the chest, straight jabs to the stomach here. Ovaint Saint Preux, he's one of those fighters that I just can't get behind OSP. When was the last time OSP won a fight? I think he won his recent fight, but lately, as of most, he's not been doing well for himself in his past 4 fights. Because Ovaint Saint Preux here, he ended up losing this bout here in what I believe to be a really one-sided bout. So Ovaint Saint Preux here, he is okay. He has fought 3 times in the year of 2020. Good on him, man, making money. He lost to Ben Rothwell in his heavyweight debut. And honestly, Ben Rothwell, the dude is a monster, okay? Even though Ben Rothwell is a journeyman at the heavyweight division, Ben Rothwell is the worst fighter you can compete with going and making your debut. I swear, Ovaint Saint Preux and Alexander Gustafsson, those 2 fighters ended up fighting against top contenders, one of them a former champion. We got Rothwell and Fabricio Verdum. It's the gatekeepers at the heavyweight division are really darn scary. And so for OSP versus Ben Rothwell, OSP had his only good round, in my opinion, was that final round. And even then, like, he was being slowly picked apart by Ben Rothwell for the most part. He defeated Alonzo Menifield, which was incredibly surprising to me. I didn't think OSP would defeat Menifield here, but Menifield, he ended up losing. And then Jamahal Hill defeats OSP via TKO up in punches. And I don't know what to expect more from OSP here. In the rest of my notes here, both fighters are constantly switching southpaw and orthodox stances in order to go find openings for counter punches here. I thought that was really cool. Because there's up until like the 2-minute mark of the fight, both fighters were still trying to feel each other out, trying to get better positioning. And both fighters initially, when they were fighting within the first 2 minutes, both fought at southpaw. And since they both fought at southpaw, their ability to throw in like low leg kicks or go for lean in for strikes was kind of awkward, and they had a tough time trying to go late in strikes from both sides here. That's why OSP was going for all these push kicks. But as the two fighters started constantly switching stances with one another and trying to get good positioning and trying to find the right angles, Jamahal Hill was a lot more aggressive than OSP here. The problem with Ovaint Saint Preux, the huge problem with him, is the fact that he starts off really slow. Like OSP, the guy can knock out anybody with like a high kick or a flying elbow, but OSP starts off very, very slow. And it usually is in the first round that kind of is a gimme win when you're fighting against OSP. So for Jamahal Hill, he's like, alright then. OSP, he becomes better as the fight continues here. And you especially don't want to fight Ovaint Saint Preux in the second round. Because that, to me, in my opinion, that's how I viewed his best round. So Jamahal Hill is like, okay, I'm going to go all aggro on him. First round is his worst round because he focuses a lot of time. It takes a long time for OSP to download the information he needs to find the right angles and right shots against his opponent. In the first round, Jamahal Hill just goes forward, he aggros, he works on the body over and over again and going in for some straight punches. He is ignoring any of the push kicks and the leg kicks, and he's going to go for like the straight jab onto the stomach or onto the chest here. So Hill wins first round due to the high volume and toe-stepping strikes landing, especially in the body. Then Jamahal Hill just goes all aggro on OSP. He wins via TKO in the second round here. He just keeps pressing forward, lands a clean shot onto OSP, lands a clean shot onto OSP. OSP, him being the proper warrior he is, he ain't gonna fall down. Like, he's just covering up, he's taking all these shots, and there's still like some time left in the second round, which led to the referee stopping the fight. Good decision there. Even though OSP wasn't knocked down, there was no way OSP would be able to recover or to endure this onslaught of offense coming in from Jamahal Hill in the second round. Yes, you could say he could, get a second win in the third round, but with how things were going on right now, I didn't think OSP would download the information he needed to go defeat Jamahal Hill. So Jamahal Hill defeats Ovaint Saint Preux in the second round via TKO. And so for the next fight here, let's talk about Gabriel Benitez against Justin James. This fight here was kind of awkward and clunky off the basis that there's complications here happening. We have like eye pokes happening. We got both fighters talking to the referee because they're unsure what's going on here. Because the referee's like, hey, make sure you don't aim for the blow, or you don't go for eye pokes, or you make sure you don't hit for the back of the head. And it was specifically a lot for Justin James, where like he kept looking to the referee like multiple times in this fight. He's like, can I do that? Am I doing good? Am I doing good? Am I doing good? So James here, he lunges in at Gabriel Benitez after James is done looking at the referee. And then I think James was going in for a takedown. He was going for the bum rush takedown, where you're not really shooting in for a single leg or double leg. You're just pressing forward and tackling the guy. So James presses forward here. Gabriel Benitez catches him with a left knee onto the body. James fumbles over. Fumbles over like a sack of potatoes. Benitez goes over, hits some ground and pound, and wins the fight via KO in the first round. Clunky fight there for James, but dang, impressive knockout victory there by Gabriel Benitez. For the next fight here, we've got Roman Dolidze versus John Allen at light heavyweights. So Dolidze almost gets a heel hook in, but they get back up. So, okay, this entire fight, this one I put down, Dolidze almost gets a heel hook in, but then they separate. That was his entire fight. This entire fight was a complete one-sided showcase of Roman Dolidze grappling and wrestling with John Allen, making him humble, and also Roman Dolidze not being able to get a heel hook in. That was the fight. The entire fight, it's like, round 1 begins, round 2, round 3, whatever round it is. They meet at the center. Both of them are doing these 50-50 exchanges. Neither fighter is really winning. You can say a slight edge goes to Allen. Like slight edge, John Allen's winning in the striking. Then Marvin Vettori, he comes in, he either clinches him, goes for a toss or for a takedown. And then Vettori just like grapples with Allen for the entire round. And then in the middle of ground and pounding, he stuns Allen with his ground and pound. Then he goes for a heel hook. And then they go spin around the octagon for a while. Ground and pound, heel hook attempt, spin around, bell rings. That's the fight in a nutshell. That's the fight for Roman Vettori and John Allen here. Center stage, striking, Allen maybe wins, takedown, roll around, heel hook attempt, heel hook attempt, heel hook attempt. I'm going to look back here. How many times did they attempt a heel hook? Hey, let me look at this. I lost count at how many times either. So let me put up some quick fight stats here. Oh, surprisingly, the strikes were kind of similar. So there were 3 attempts for heel hooks, which is surprising for me. It is surprising. He attempted a heel hook every round, but I felt like he was going to go for the heel hook multiple times, but he was never able to successfulully get it or be in a proper position for it, though, which leads to them just rolling around and Vettori just getting it back on top. But here's some interesting stats here. So, Vettori was actually winning in the striking category. He attempted 109 strikes, landed 51 of them. Compare that to Allen, who landed 86. No, he landed 80. He landed 29, but attempted 86. So, when it comes to the grappling, when it comes to the stand-up game here, Roman Vettori pretty much dominated this entire fight. The fight stats say it. The eye test says it. But interestingly enough, though, and this was a very, amusing thing that happened, was that Roman Vettori ended up winning the fight via split decision. He won the fight via split decision, and then Paul Felder and Dominic Cruz, they just go off, man. These two go off on this long rant. I say kind of unprofessional rant, really. Where they're like, you know who that guy who gave the scorecard for John Allen? He's the same guy who scored the fight for me. So Paul Felder, when he fought against RDA, he didn't like Chris Lee. He thought, man, it was unfair that Chris Lee, didn't give me a score in my fight. Dominic Cruz, who I believe Dominic Cruz has a grudge on judges and referees every time I hear him on commentary. This dude it's a venom. I hear venom in his voice whenever he talks about referees and judges. And I understand where he's coming from here, because even now, he's still upset over his fight against Henry Cejudo. I get it. But dude, Dominic Cruz going off yeah man, these judges, man, these guys just don't understand MMA. These guys are boxing judges. They're boxing judges. They don't understand how our sport works. And you know what? It's unprofessional, and they shouldn't be here. You know what? Chris Lee, your name should be on the, it should be, on the monitor right now over here, so people in the world can see that you are the one who was a bad judge and all that stuff. And then Paul Felder and Dominic Cruz just going off and off. John Anik has to go, try to keep control of the commentary team, and it's yeah. Next fight coming up here, Gabriel Benitez and Justin James. And you can hear Cruz and Felder, they're laughing, they're smirking. They still want to continue talking about this Chris Lee guy being a bad judge. Are they wrong? Honestly, okay, for the Paul Felder fight, that was scored right. Rafael dos Anjos defeated Paul Felder, right? The right person won that fight. Okay, there. Got it. Was it wrong for Chris Lee to judge the fight as he did in this fight? Obviously, without a doubt, Roman Vettori, he defeated John Allen. 100%. Stats say it. Eye test says it. Chris Lee, I don't get what his mentality was for fighting, I would absolutely like it. I would enjoy it if after every round, if after every fight, the judges, like the camera goes over to the judges, and each judge explains to the camera like a short summary as to why they believe fighter A defeated fighter B. That's all I want to see. Let's have the judges tell the audience members why they selected or how they judged the fight as they did. Instead, all we're hearing is, do not trust the judges, man. Don't leave it in the judges' hands. We keep hearing it over and over again from Dana White. Don't leave it to the judges because it's just a well-known fact that the judges are incompetent. And it's just accepted that those judges are incompetent. Explain to us, it's either hire incompetent judges or have the judges that you have hired right now, they go on and explain why they judged the fight the way they did. That's all I'm asking for. Not asking for much, just asking an explanation. Alright then, this has been going on for decades now. And it's upsetting from a fan's perspective to go see the scorecards and us wondering, why? And then we have to go and speculate. There are even fights years ago that we're still talking about and we're still speculating as to like, who really won that fight? The Carlos Condit versus Nick Diaz fight. People go on and still to this day talk about on who actually won that fight. And people can give very different viewpoints as to their explanation as to why they scored the fight the way that they should, but I want to hear it from the judges themselves. So the fights can make a little bit more sense when we know what the results are. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back after the short break to discuss an insane slam knockout. See you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back, and so let me discuss a very unique knockout here. So we have Matt Wyman versus Jordan Levitz at lightweights, and I'll explain to you what happens in this fight here. And the way how I explain it now is going to be kind of strange because Levitz shoots in for a double leg takedown, but decides to just lift him up for a bear hug. Have you ever bear hug anybody? You're just like lifting them as if you're getting this like really big hug, and then Matt Wyman just goes limp. He goes limp on Jordan Levitz. Then they're like standing there awkwardly for like 12 seconds. Commentary team are like, "Yep, they're there." He lifts him off the ground. Okay. Then Levitz slowly turns around, makes his way to his own corner. Dominic Cruz or Paul Felder, one of them, they're laughing. They're like, bring him over to his own corner. Sure. And then Levitt just throws him to the ground like a proper spine buster slam and wins the fight via slam KO 30 seconds into the fight. You heard me right. Jordan Levitt wins fight via spine buster slam 30 seconds into the first round. That was certainly it was both a scary and a strange knockout to go see, because here's how the knockout happened. So as he slammed Wyman to the ground, his head bounces off the mats, And so that leads to Wyman getting a concussion. And it even took a while for Wyman to get back up, actually. It was like kind of scary. Where it's like, oh man, can Wyman even get up? And then afterwards, Jordan Levitt and his corner crew teammates, they come back in the octagon. Then Levitt's corner crew lifts Levitt up in the air and does the dirty dancing thing. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. He does like the swan dive pose with his corner crew. Levitt's got this big smile on his face. Wyman's corpse still there. Dominant crew starts making fun of the audience, being like, that right there is a dirty dancing reference. Yep, look at that. He's gonna do a cartwheel now? No cartwheel. Alright then, sure. But also, before he does the dirty dancing like swan pose with his teammates, he ended up doing the splits. And then after knocking out Wyman, we end up seeing a slow motion of Levitt doing the splits. It was a strange fight. Very, very strange fight. And it was the first fight of the main card. Okay, do it as you will here. But one fight I do want to mention here, which was the main event for the prelims, and it was Luis Mocha versus Jose Canoniz. And before this, so reading up on this fight, I was like, okay, I know how this fight's going to play off, okay? It's going to be 2 dudes just swinging their arms, and it's going to be erratic, it's going to be chaos, it's going to be fun. And then I put down my notes here as I'm watching this fight. These guys are fighting how I expected. Just unloading a flurry of strikes. Smoko gets a takedown and attempts a mounted guillotine. First round goes to Smoko barely. When I say barely, because it's hard for me to call this fight. Because you got 2 fighters swinging their arms. You don't really know who exactly is winning in these exchanges. Because it looks like both of them are getting rocked. But I'm just giving to Smoko in the first round off the basis that he did some strikes and got a takedown compared to Jose Canoniz, who got some good strikes but no takedown, so I'm going to give the small edge to Smolka. Second round, Luis Smolka gets a takedown twice in the second, proceeds to do a judo throw on Canoniz, then proceeds to backmount Canoniz. Smolka hits some ground and pound, and then gets the TKO finish. Luis Smolka wins the fight via TKO in the second round, and what was a chaotic, wild Diego Sanchez Clay Guida-esque fight, except a lot less blood, but it was that type of fight. We got 2. It's not the most skilled or the most prettiest fight to look at. It's definitely not the most technical fight in this entire card. But it's one of the most hardiest of hard fights out there, where 2 dudes are just laying it on the line, and they have nothing to lose here. Neither of them are top ranked fighters, so none of them have anything to lose in this fight. Which meant they went out there, went all full aggro, whoever survived in the end, that was the fighter who ended up winning. It was really a fun fight to watch, and once again, I recommend people to go and look into the prelims if you can. There are only 3 prelim fights in this entire card, which, it kind of helps me out because I don't have to go keep track on all the fights and only focus on the fights that I want to see, and that was the fight I really do and want to see. And it was a fun one. And so that's UFC Fight Night, a night full of really fun action. And now let's go to the news brief here. What is going on in the world of MMA? Last week I talked about Clarissa Shields here, but now we know she'll be training at Jackson Wink MMA. This is coming in from ESPN.com. Clarissa Shields training with Jackson Wink MMA. Sky's the limit, coach says, is coming in from Mark Ramondi via ESPN. Clarissa Shields has not wasted any time jumping into the MMA world. ESPN's top pound-for-pound woman boxer signed PFL to compete in MMA earlier this week, and on Friday she arrived at Albuquerque, New Mexico to train at Jackson Wink MMA with their friend John Jones, one of the best UFC champions of all time. Greg Jackson, the legendary Jackson Wink MMA coach, who has mentored the likes of GSP, John Jones, said Shields will be with the team for a 2-week trial period to see if she likes it. As far as raw ability, Jackson raved about her and her potential in MMA. She said Shields is one of the top 5 athletes with the most upside whom he has coached. He also said it was a little crazy how she picked things up so quickly despite having no MMA experience. If they bring her up right and she does it step by step and doesn't rush any things, the sky is the limit. Jackson told ESPN, literally the sky is the limit. Don't say literally. No. Don't say literally the sky's the limit, okay? It just bugs me saying that. But he says that she's really good. On her first day of training, Jackson said Shields already nailed the art of the head kick, landing perfectly over and over for an hour. Shields, a former 2-time Olympic boxing gold medalist, is known for her pushing power and athleticism in boxing. What will set her apart won't be her athletic gifts, though Jackson said it'll be her mind. Jackson is quoted here for saying, "Not only is she brilliantly smart, she is one of the strongest women I've ever met in my life, and I've met some strong women. Holy cow, is she physically strong, just an insanely talented person. There are plenty of athletic people out there that aren't as sharp as she is. She's really, really intelligent." And then he posted here, and John Jones also, posted a video of Claressa Shields here training, and John Jones says, "Okay, this is pretty exciting." Jackson Jackson goes on to say that it's the only gym Holly Holm were to call home. And then he mentioned he's got a lot of potential here for Claressa Shields. Goes on to say, so Claressa Shields goes on to say, "I was telling MMA fans I'm not just a talker." So she tells this to Brett Okamoto via ESPN. "I know that's what they're used to, all these cloud chasers out there. I'm like the real deal. Anything I say, I can do. I put my best foot forward, and I do it. I'm not coming to MMA to lose. The next time they see me in this cage, I'm going to have muscles coming out of my damn neck, training so hard to win." So, the big X factor as to the breaking point of whether or not Claressa Shields is truly going to excel in mixed martial arts at the highest level will be wrestling. Jackson Wink can train their fighters to be really good grapplers, but will she be able to go transition from being a boxer to a great wrestler? Now, we've seen it in the past. We've seen wrestlers become great strikers. We've seen Khabib Nurmagomedov. We've seen Justin Gaethje. Tony Ferguson has a jiu-jitsu background doing boxing. We know there are fighters who come from the grappling field ending up becoming good strikers here, but we really don't see all that much of great strikers becoming good wrestlers. More so in the sense that it becomes, like, if you're a striker, you're kind of told, alright, stick to the striking, you're only learning wrestling purely for being a defensive skill. Kind of like Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell can wrestle, he just doesn't want to wrestle because his striking is really darn good. He just uses his wrestling ability to go stuff takedowns and defend himself against grapplers. And if Claressa Shields can be taught how to defend the takedowns, how to handle herself on the ground, how to handle clinching positions onto the cage, how to handle somebody going for a side position, how do you handle somebody on mount, how do you go avoid certain chokes, or how to avoid certain submission holds. Claressa Shields, I agree, has a high ceiling. Has a very high ceiling, and also, she's not even at her physical peak yet. But she's still a very physical, domineering woman. Honestly, I expect Claressa Shields to get, to go on a winning streak. Get a couple rounds in, a couple fights in. She can go 3-0, 4-0, 5-0. But at some point, when she competes at the highest level, as in fighting for a championship belt, or fighting against top contenders in any organization, then we're going to see how good she really is. It was also reported out there that, if you don't follow Khabib on Instagram, he put on his Instagram that he's going to go have discussions and talks with Dana White over something. And a lot of people are speculating that Khabib was going to go and make a comeback fight here, that he's going to come back and he's going to go and compete against GSP, Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier. That's what we thought. He'll be coming back to the sport and fight. But instead, Khabib is now a fight promoter. He's got his own mixed martial arts organization called Eagle MMA. And he's going to go and so his discussion with Dana White is very interesting in the sense that he wants to create this developmental system in his own MMA promotion, and then after they go and succeed and do well for themselves in his promotion, they can go branch out and be able to go and compete at the UFC. Like, they'll be given a UFC contract if they defend their belt X amount of times. I'm looking at this, and I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. Because Khabib, he's talked about it, like he wants to go and be able to push others to become successful, the same way how his father was able to push him. And so he'll be running his own promotion in Dagestan. He's going to run it though, and he wants to create a feeder system for the UFC. Problem though is that I'm still unsure on how exactly this feeder system is going to work. Because as of right now, as I'm talking, the Dana White Contender Series is happening. The Ultra Fighter Series is happening. Invicta FC is happening. We have fighters from PFL, Bellator, One Championship. We have free agents coming in and out. I've been saying this for a while. The UFC roster is bloated. It's incredibly bloated, and it's tough to find in place fighters right now. Like, we got some fighters here competing like once a year, some fighters competing 3 or 4 times a year, some fighters who are incapable of being booked in the first place, some fighters dropping out. The roster right now, especially in this time of COVID, is very difficult to organize, and I thought to myself that there's no way Dana White is going to go and add even more fighters or have another feeder system, because technically, Invicta FC, that's a feeder system. Khabib referenced this in that he wants his feeder system to be similar to Invicta, to which, like, if you become an Invicta champion, it's very likely you're going to go to the UFC. For instance, Jinh Frey. Jinh Frey was an Invicta champion, and then she's now currently contracted with the UFC. Kay Hansen, former Invicta contender. Stolienko had an amazing fight earlier this year and just fought in the UFC. So Khabib wants to go create this feeder system. I think this feeder system will work. I think this feeder system will be at its very best if it can be in contact with other MMA promotions here, with One Championship, with Bellator, with PFL. I think that would be great. From where I stand right now, I think, I believe Dana White's going to accept this. I think Dana White's going to accept this agreement, but it's going to take a while until we see a significant influx of fighters coming in from Khabib's promotion over to the UFC. Now, I'm not discrediting the quality of these fighters here. I'm not discrediting it, though. But, like, as it pertains to, like, Khabib, how he says it, he's like, if a guy becomes a champion at his promotion and defends their belt like 7 or 5 times, which even then is already asking for a lot, then they could go and move up in the UFC. And Khabib, he's already thinking like years in advance. He's already planning out everything here for this system to properly work. I'm excited for it, though. I'm definitely going to try to cover Khabib's promotion when it starts getting events going on. When they have events going on, I'm going to watch it. It will be interesting to see what the age range is for his promotion, because if it's a feeder system comprised entirely of prospects who are expected to be there at Khabib's promotion for a while until they go move up to another promotion, there's no way they're going to have fighters who are like in their mid-30s, right? Their early to mid-30s. I'm pretty sure he's going to go after fighters who are like under the age of 27, at most 29. Because if it's an entire organization based around prospects graduating and moving on to do something else, then it'll be hard to imagine any veteran fighters competing at that promotion. And so you are listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Coming back after the short break here, discussing the new UFC cuts for the news brief. See you soon.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And we are back, and so welcome to the news brief portion of the podcast here, to which I bring about daily MMA news and discuss it. So first off, coming from the top here, we have Yoel Romero being cut. Or practically, we have 4 new fighters being cut from the UFC. Now, this coming in from MMA Junkie, that it is expected the UFC are going to cut about 75 fighters starting last month. So among the fighters who've been cut since last month has been reported, there's going to be 75 fighters who are being cut. We have Justin Ledet, Bevan Lewis, Cole Smith, Colin Hookbuddy, and also now we got here. Oh yeah, we got Juicier Formiga, who was a former UFC fight contender, along with Yoel Romero. Yeah, Yoel Romero got cut from the UFC, a huge fan favorite. And it is understandable as to why these cuts are happening. Because, guess what? the Dana White Contender Series and also the Ultimate Fighter is right around the corner. Dana White is handing out, I forgot the number, but there is this incredibly high amount of number of fighters coming in from the Dana White Contender Series. And Dana White, he's all up for it though. Every single time someone asks Dana, hey, what are your expectations of these fighters? And Dana White always says that the fighters he brings in from the Dana White Contender Series are fighters he expects who can truly bring in, like, I start trying to explain it. He expects these fighters to not necessarily be like championship contenders, but be able to compete at a very high level in the rankings. And this past week we had Deiveson Figueiredo against a fighter who came from the Dana White Contender Series. We have fighters who are coming in from the Contender Series and are slowly making a name for themselves here. And when you look at some of the divisions, whether it be the light heavyweight division, whether it be the women's flyweight or the women's bantamweight divisions, even when you look at something like the middleweight division, a lot of these fighters specifically rank from like 6 to 13 are all fighters who, I'm not saying all fighters, but for the most part, fighters who are ranked 6 to 13 in those divisions aren't necessarily fighters that you expect to become overachievers or to be able to be actual contenders among the top 5. Which leads to the UFC doing the Contender Series, doing the Ultimate Fighter, and getting new blood in these divisions. So you have new fighters coming in, and also note, I remember John McCarthy talked about this, and that and here's like one big reason as to why Corey Anderson ended up leaving the UFC, and it's that he was working off his Ultimate Fighter contract. And John McCarthy said that these contracts are technically 6-figure contracts, but you have to go fight multiple times, many times over per year in order to finally get to that 6-figure salary here. So you have to maybe have like 5 times, 6 times, 7 times to go reach that 6-figure salary here. And no, most fighters fight like 2 times a year. Now, this year, though, due to COVID and a lot of specific things happening, some fighters are dropping out. Some fighters are replacing other fighters due to some technicalities with traveling. International fighters are struggling trying to get to the States to be able to go fight at the Apex facility building. Things are very complicated right now. That is why we're seeing some fighters like Hannah Cyphers and Khamzat Chimaev and Mackenzie Dern who are open to fighting 3 or 4 times in just 1 year. So for 2020, there are a lot of technicalities to it. Also, let's not forget, there are suspensions that happen after the fight. If you accumulate a certain amount of damage after a fight, you are suspended for, it could be 2 months, it could be 4 months, 6 months, could be even a year. Suspensions happen where they have to not be able to fight for 6 months and then get a doctor's notice. And then once they get like a slip from the doctor, then they could potentially fight 2 months later after that. So, yeah, getting as much fights as you can is a rarity in mixed martial arts. So, knowing that now, these fighters coming from Ultimate Fighter, coming from the Dana White Contender Series, their contracts are cheap. Some new fighters like Kay Hansen coming in. Yeah, she's been pulling out really good performances for the UFC, but because she's coming in from the Dana White Contender Series contract, she's not making all that much money. Then she's like in her early 20s, so for her, the amount of money she's making is really good for herself. But for a lot of fighters, Kay Hansen is a very special athlete, in that she's coming to the UFC at such an early, young age. But a lot of fighters, whether it be like even Daniel Cormier or Romero, they come in to mixed martial arts in their mid-30s or late 30s. Most of the fighters who compete in the Dana White Contender Series are in their late 20s. So they're not making all that much money, and they're potentially at the peak of their primes. They're not worth that much. Now you compare that to a UFC fighter who is trying to come off their old contract, wants to go bump themselves up into the new contract, but a lot of these fighters here, like, I'll be perfectly honest, do most of you know who Justin Ledette, Bevan Lewis, or Cole Smith is? Do you know who any of those fighters are? I know Formiga and I know Yoel Romero, But right now, like, the fight division is considered the least marketable division among all the divisions now in the UFC. We've got, and that's no disrespect to Deiveson Figueiredo, that's just like the honest truth. We have Yoel Romero, who is in the downturn of his career, who is an absolutely beast wrestler, but he just can't wrestle anymore. And the guy, although he's incredibly entertaining and people in the MMA community love him, I love Yoel Romero. He is super entertaining. The guy is a once-in-a-lifetime athlete. The fact that he is as good as he is, as built as he is, with his age, the fact that he has so much charisma despite his inability to talk like proper English, the guy is incredibly likable. But sadly, he is in a downturn of his career, and it's understandable as to why he would be cut. Do I expect the guy to continue fighting? I'm not really sure. It feels like it's the injuries that he's accumulated over the years. The guy's almost 50 years old. The guy's almost 50. And he's competed at the highest level in the UFC for years in his 40s. The fact that he is able to accomplish as much as he did is amazing. Though I will not be surprised if aging fighters start getting cut. I will not be surprised about that. And now this coming in from MMA Junkie that ex-champ Dominic Cruz is set to face against Casey Kenny coming up in an upcoming UFC event. It'll be at UFC 259 in March of 2021. This is being written in by Mike Bone from MMA Junkie. Former UFC champ Dominic Cruz is going to face against Casey Kenny and will be his first non-title bout in more than 6 years. Dominic Cruz, 22-23 in his MMA career, 5-2 in the UFC. Will be fighting against Kenny, who is 16-2 in MMA, 5-1 in the UFC. It is a 135-pound matchup coming up at UFC 259. Ooh, man. Alright, so I will say this right now. Dominic Cruz can still fight at a really high level. He's incredibly good, still impressive. His performance against Henry Cejudo was very eye-opening to me. And you can say the guy lost the fight due to the ref stopping the fight way too early. I thought the fight stopped way too early. And one of the things with Henry Cejudo, and I love Henry Cejudo, the guy's great, but a lot of his fights do have a tendency of ending super early. And because of how fast and quick those fights go off, and how quick Henry Cejudo can go pounce on a person and do ground and pound, when he defeated TJ Dillashaw, when he defeated Dominic Cruz, I'm like, you know what? Yes, congratulations, you won the fight, and a win is a win. But I would like to see the fight just go on for a couple more seconds. And I really do believe Dominic Cruz was still able to fight. I think he definitely was good enough to go and continue on fighting in that fight against Henry Cejudo. I think the fight was called off way too early. And note, every time you go and listen to any fight, whether it be a UFC Fight Night on ESPN, a UFC pay-per-view event, whenever Dominic Cruz is talking and he sees somebody like who is kind of stunned from a strike, he's always like, oh man, hopefully the referee doesn't stop a fight here like my fight. Like, he's always making an emphasis as to referees, man. These guys, they always mess people up in fights, man. I know. There's a lot of bitterness to Dominic Cruz in a fight against Henry Cejudo, and in his fight against Casey here. I really don't know who will win here. I am pulling for Cruz. I was wrong about Cruz's performance. I thought Cruz would look bad against Henry Cejudo. I was proven wrong with that, and sadly, I don't know that much about Casey Kenny all that well to make a proper analysis as to who would win when these two fight off. But, whoever wins. And yes, whatever my opinion is on early referee stoppages, if it happens, it happens. I think I saw a video out there where it was Court McGee fighting in the Ultimate Fighter. So it was the Ultimate Fighter season where Chuck Liddell was a coach and Court McGee, I think, was the one fighting here. I could be wrong with that. But it ended up being that McGee, or Chuck Liddell's fighter, wasn't able to win the fight. He wasn't able to win the fight. He says the judges, oh man, the judges, the officiating, it's all wrong. Chuck Liddell's livid. He's yelling at Dana White. He's yelling at all the fighters. He's yelling at the other coaches. He's being like, this is ridiculous, man. The referee, the judges, man, they mess things up. And Dana White's like, yeah, don't leave it to the judges, or don't leave it in the hands of other people. And I'm like, Why does it have to be that way? Why can't you just hire... When will there ever be a day where Dana White can be like, yeah, you can trust it. You can trust the referee. Yeah, you can trust the judges. They'll make the right decisions, because it's basically implied that if a fight goes into decision or if a fight goes into early stoppage, it pretty much is like, yep, it is what it is. Whether it be the right decision or the wrong decision, it doesn't matter. It's still a decision, and it sucks, doesn't it? I don't know. I feel like Dana White should do something about that. I do believe so on that. So, this is coming in from MMAmania.com. That's from Conor McGregor's camp. His coach goes on and say, Poirier stands no chance against Stone Cold Killer Conor McGregor. I'll be excited when those two fights, but I don't expect this fight to end off early. Dustin Poirier is one of the best fighters in the entire lightweight division, and he's a very tough guy who can go rounds deep, can go 3, 4, 5 rounds and remain and be consistent through all 5 rounds of action, remain a consistent pace in terms of sheer volume of strikes. And here's how I predict things going. If Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier were to fight, and I understand that those two are scheduled to fight against each other, but knowing Conor McGregor, knowing how match cards are always constantly changing, I'm still skeptical on those two actually fighting, since I've been waiting for it for a long time. But if those two, and when those two do end up going fighting, I say Conor McGregor easily wins first and second round. If he doesn't knock out Dustin Poirier in the first and second round, there's a real possibility that Dustin Poirier can walk away defeating Conor McGregor in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. That could actually happen. Now, chances are Conor McGregor will go in as a favorite, but do not count out Dustin Poirier. And so to end off today's podcast here, let me give you a short quick preview of UFC 256 coming up Saturday, December 12th. We have main event Deiveson Figueiredo against Brandon Moreno, Tony Ferguson against Charles Oliveira, Renato Moicano against Rafael Fizias, Kevin Holland versus Jacare Souza, Junior Dos Santos versus Sir Salgain, and then the prelim main event we have Andrea Lee versus Jillian Robertson. The entire card is stacked and full of possible matches of your contenders here. The main event has 2 guys coming in who just recently fought about a month ago. Tony Ferguson and Charles Oliveira pretty much is a Spider-Man meme where they see 2 Spider-Mans putting each other. It really is that. I can't think of 2 fighters who fight as similar as these two and even in the physicals, they look pretty much the same. I have their side-by-side picture here, and they have the same haircut also, and the sculpture of their face is very similar. One guy throws in weird high flying kicks, the other guy throws in Superman elbow forearm smashes. So, Charles Oliveira versus Tony Ferguson, that is a fight that I am incredibly excited about, and I can't wait to watch it. With that in mind, all I gotta say is thank you for listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.